I'm about to get going here, so if you want to come and join this crew, make sure you get your tag scanned. Make sure you get a ticket, because at the end of the presentation, I'm going to be giving this away but you have to have a ticket. So make sure you get yourself scanned. Make sure you get one of those little blue tickets, and don't forget the awesome giveaway that you've got on the seat there in front of you. A lovely piece of plastic that I'm sure you. I'll stop. Sorry, I'll get to. We'll make great use of. Okay, there are more seats at the front if you don't have to sit down. Although if you do stand at the back, it makes it easy, quick exit when it gets too boring. That's fine. Okay, well, I think I will get started because there's more important things to get on with afterwards. As I said, I've just reminded you about the giveaway, so make sure you get your ticket before that. My name is Chris Welsh. If you follow the Cisco community forum, you'll see me up there as Red Nectar, because that's how I while away a lot of the hours of the day, is trying to help other people. And I really encourage the rest of you, if you've got problems, go to the community forum. And maybe once you've had your problem solved, you might be encouraged to help others. And that's kind of how I got into it. And somehow or other, they've given me some status of VIP, or I don't know. But whatever it is, that's where I help people out. So if you want to visit there later on, you're welcome as well. So let's get started on what we're about to talk about, which is trying to make sense of Intersight's role-based access control. Now, if you're not using Intersight, it's time you started thinking about that. If you are in a UCS environment or a UCSX environment, you really don't have much choice, right? But it does more than UCS, but I'll let the other experts talk to you about that. All I'm going to talk to you about today is how to try and make that role-based access control into a manageable unit that you can use to your advantage. So my objectives are give you a strategy to create islands of equipment, which are called resource groups. Okay, they're pretty simple, really. But the thing is, you don't have to use them. And that's a trap that people fall into. Those resource groups can be matched to users, but it's not a direct link. You've got to go through something called user-defined roles and another thing called organizations. And it's the organizations, I guess, that kind of give you the flexibility of being able to do things in different ways. But the real key is the role-based access control. And I've got a little promise here to tell you how to repair your setup if you're already jumped in without doing role-based access control. I may not keep that promise. We'll see how we go for time. Now, here's a little map. This makes Spaghetti Junction at Roselle look like a chicken, child's play. Because when we take all of these objects, we've got resource groups, which are where you put your targets, your resources. They're linked to organizations, but it's a one-to-many relationship. You can take your resource group and link it to many organizations. You can have organizations linked to many resource groups. Organizations then are linked back to the user via these role-based, by these user-defined roles, okay? The path through this great big quagmire doesn't need to be as ugly as what it looks on the screen there. And that's really, I guess, the key to the whole thing, is to try and keep a nice, clean path there and not get yourself into a great big spider's web organization like this. Because if you actually do something like this, you're going to find that everybody's got the same rights anyway, everywhere. So that's where we start out. And I think we should start by getting you to meet some of my friends, and we'll try and make this a little bit more personal. So first of all, I've got Bell. Bell's in charge of Coffs Harbour, right? So we've got a data center at Coffs Harbour. There's UCS storage there and Pure Storage. So UCS Sagi's there and Pure Storage, right? Okay. I've kept it simple. There's other things that we can do in Intersight, but let's just keep it to just two little things, because it gets complicated enough, right? So she oversees everything at Coffs Harbour. Then I've got Tim, he's at Sans Souci, right there on the beach. And he oversees everything at Sans Souci. And then we've got these guys. We've got Ben, who looks after all things UCS, but he's got to role at Sans Souci and at Coffs Harbour, so he's got two different places to look after. And then we've got Josh, who takes care of everything to do with storage. But that's not all. We've got Lara, who manages the whole show. She's the boss of the whole shebang, right? We're not going to give her admin rights. We'll just give her read-only rights, but she wants to be able to see everything, which is fair enough. And she's asked Fatima to go and create the system that we need to be able to achieve this, right? And so that's her job, right now. Now, remember, we've got these two different sites. We've got a user that's in charge of each site. We've got another guy that's looking after UCS and another guy that's looking after storage. So if that's our picture, let's not forget Lara, who's got access to everything, and of course Fatima, that needs access to everything as well. If that's our picture, the question is, how many groupings of equipment am I going to need to do this? Do I put everything into one group? Well, that's not going to suit. It's not going to suit Tim. If I put everything into Sans Souci and Coffs Harbour, that's not going to suit the UCS server guy. And so I've got to come up with a way of breaking this down into smaller units, okay? And probably the simplest way is to say, let's have a resource group for Coffs Harbour UCS devices, another resource group for Sans Souci UCS, and then the same again for the storage, right? Now, this is not the only way to cut this cake, but I think this is probably going to be the most flexible, where you try and break it down into fairly small resource groups. There is a catch, and I'll get to the catch later on that. All right? By default, there is always another resource group, which is the default resource group, and everything belongs to the default resource group. Remember, devices can be members of multiple resource groups. What I'm trying to suggest to you is that that fly should go away. So for those people on YouTube there is a fly flying around right there. If you keep these fairly small, it makes them more manageable, and not too many links, right? You don't want to have your resource groups linked to too many organizations. So if we just use the default, it ends up looking like this. All right, everybody's got access to everything, and it's a bit of a mess, really. So my first tip is, before you claim any devices, create some resource groups. Now, as I said, if you've already done this, you can backtrack. It can get a little bit messy, particularly if Intersight Managed Mode is involved, but you can backtrack. You can create your resource groups later and add your devices to these resource groups. But create your resource groups. If you create them before you start claiming devices, then when you claim your device, you can put them in the resource group, right? Now, the challenge is, if we've got all these different resource groups, how do I link my users up to the resource groups? And that's really a three-step process. To be able to do that, I'm going to have to create all those other things. I'm going to have to create the organizations that can be linked to the resource groups. And I have to create those user-defined roles. And they are really tricky, because there's system-defined roles and user-defined roles. And when you come to allocate a user a role, they all come up in a big list there, So user-defined, system, what? And of course, it's very tempting just to say, I'll just give admin rights to everybody, right? And that's one of the problems we can have. And of course, you will have to create the users. I'm not going into how you create that. I'm just going to assume they're using Cisco users, but you can link that to LDAP and that sort of thing. In fact, if you link it to LDAP, you can get some extra options there by using groups as well. So let's start at step one. There are 3 steps here, right? Create the organizations, right? Remember, we've already created the resource groups, I guess, but create the organizations. Again, if we keep this as a one-to-one organization for each resource group, you don't have to do it that way, but it does keep life a lot simpler to begin with. Maybe when you're down the track, you might try to do things a bit more sophisticated, but to begin with, each organization's linked to a resource group. And you do that at the time that you create your organization, right? So here we're creating your organization, and I've got my resource groups, one for Sans Souci UCS, one for Coffs Harbour UCS, one for Sans Souci Pure, and one for Coffs Harbour Pure, right? If I were to link this to the default resource group, then this organization is going to be linked to all equipment, right? So we'll leave it like that. One resource group, one organization per resource group. And as I just mentioned, if you want to try and avoid spaghetti junction, if you want to avoid noodle soup, then keep that one-to-one relationship nice and simple. Step 2 is a bit trickier, right? And this is where we get to these roles. The system comes with at least 12 system-defined roles. And if you look at your list here, I've just done a little filter here of type system-defined. Turns out that some of the user-defined roles are defined by the system as well. That gets really confusing. But these are the ones that the system comes with. Account administrator, you've got to have at least one that has that role, right? That's the person that's going to do everything. And of course, the most common mistake that people make is they say, oh yeah, here you go, account administrator, maybe read all, but they get access to everything, right? So please don't do that. Instead, my next tip is to create an administrative role. This is a user-defined role for each administrative group, for each of those groups. Now, if you recall, we had some that were looking after UCS, some that were looking after Pure, some that were looking after this site at Sans Souci, and some that were looking after Coffs Harbour. And so that's what we're trying to achieve here. Now, if I'm creating, well, you can probably figure it out. I'm giving this role access to the Coffs Harbour UCS organisation and the Coffs Harbour Pure organisation. So this is going to be the role for the administrator for Coffs Harbour. Right? So there'll be a similar one, this for Sans Souci UCS and Sans Souci Pure. There'll be another one that's Sans Souci UCS and Coffs Harbour UCS to get the UCS. Okay, we can group them like that, right? But it's these roles that you create, the user-defined roles, that are the key thing. Now, the other thing that you need to remember with these roles, I think I did there. I did. I've got a little rundown there of the kinds of privileges you need to give each role. This is rather confusing as well, because as you go through to create your role, you get a list of all of these different privileges. I don't know what a privilege. Device administrator, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? Yeah, it must be good. Pretty powerful role. No, device administrator only lets you claim devices. It does jack. Right? Server administrator lets you administer servers. Storage administrator sounds good, but that's really more related to SAN, but we'll stick it in there anyway. And UCS manager administrator as well. If you're going to get to Intersight management mode, you need one of those. So kind of need a few of these. I've got some ticks there to sort of give you a bit of an idea of what you can. Some of them I've just put question marks, maybe, So if you've got a integrated systems administrator, so if you've got FlexPod, then you might want to put that in the role. User access administrator can just add and subtract users. The account administrator is probably going to do that, right? And probably the account administrator is the person that's going to do the claiming of the targets as well. So when you create these roles, you're going to see them in a list. They're going to be listed up there with all of the system-based ones. So my advice here is to give them some sort of distinctive name. My convention is I always end with underscore role. Okay, so that's how I handle that. Easy to identify because it's got the underscore role when I'm trying to assign this to a user. As I mentioned, there are some user-defined roles that are created by the system. Go figure that. That's what they are. And then these ones that are underlined in blue are the system-defined privileges. I might have said roles, but they're privileges. They look very much like roles, but these are privileges. There's almost a one-to-one relationship between privileges and system roles, but not quite. So we've got ourselves some roles, and if I've got 4 different administration groups, then I'll need to create 4 role-based user-defined roles, okay? And maybe I might even have an extra one here where I put in all sites, a read-only for all sites. That could be a useful one as well. Maybe I'll have some other read-only. I've got a read-only UCS role there. I could create as many of these. You may not need to create these until you need them, but I've put a few up there as examples that you might go. However, what about our users? Okay, the users haven't been added yet. Tim's going to go to the beach, right? He's there on CNCs. He's off. Josh is into morning tea already. Lara's sitting there fuming. She's sitting in the car. Poor old Bill doesn't know what to do, and Ben's pretty mild. He's just waiting there. He waits patiently. But that's okay because Fatima can come in. She's the account administrator. She can fix all of that for you guys, right? So let's see how she does that. So step 3 is to create the users, and it's during this step where kind of everything hopefully comes together. And as I mentioned before, as she's creating each user, she will have to assign them to a role. Now, users can be assigned to more than one role, but each time you log in, you have to choose one of those roles that you've been assigned. If you've only been assigned to one role and you straight in, that's it, you don't even know that there are other possibilities, okay? So Fatima does that, and we'll assume that Fatima's following all my tips, that she's got access to all devices, all organizations, all resource groups, all policies and profiles, all user rights and roles. I think I repeated that. So she needs to get cracking. She needs to create these things, claim the devices, and put the users in their right places, right? Now, we'll assume that she's already created the resource groups because I showed you screen dumps of that earlier on. And we'll assume that she's already created the organizations because we showed you screen dumps of that earlier on. And we know we've got a one-to-one relationship between organizations and research groups, right? Now, we've got all of these different administrative groups. So I mentioned 4 before, but then of course we've got the whole lot. The whole lot's actually fairly easy, so I'm going to leave that to the side and concentrate mainly on these 4 groupings here, these guys over here. Okay, that's the main focus. And the key to getting this right is getting these user-defined roles. Okay, and we'll equate our users to these. Notice that each role is linked to 2 different organizations. Okay, so claiming devices. Right, remember when we claim devices, we're going to put them in a resource group. Again, you can put them in multiple resource groups, but if you do that, then that spaghetti junction starts getting in the road there. So we try and put each new target, each device we're going to think. So this must be the UCS that we're claiming for Sans Souci here. We're going to put it in that resource group, and then we're going to have to link our users to the newly defined roles. Okay, so just recall that Bell looks after Coffs Harbour, Tim takes care of Sans Souci, Ben looks after UCS, Joss makes all the storage work, and Lara runs the whole show, right? So that's how we're going to try and work with it, right? Now, linking these users to those defined roles is all we've got to do. It's pretty simple, really. If we got Bell up there at Coffs Harbour, she's linked over to the UCS organisation, she's linked over to the Pure organisation, and so forth and so forth. Okay, so that's those four taken care of, but I think we missed someone. Okay, how does Fatima give Lara the access that she needs? She only needs read-only access, so we're not going to give her admin rights, but what we could do, I could say, I'll tell you what, we'll create a whole bunch of read-only roles and we can give Lara access to all of those. That'll keep her happy, she'll be good. But you've got to go through this process now of every time she logs in, she'll have to choose which one she can use, which means that she's not going to see everything all at once. But it's not as bad as it sounds. In many ways, this is actually, this can be very useful. It gives you a way of saying, look, I only want to look at the UCSX stuff today because I've got a role that's set up for that. I only want to look at the UCS managed UCS devices today, and you've got a role set up to look at that. I only look at you. So having these different, having the option to choose these different roles as you log in is actually quite useful. But there's another option. I could use the system-defined read-only role and link Lara to that. Yep. And that's automatically linked to the default system organization, the default resource group, where she's good. Or I could create another user-defined role that allows viewing all objects. That would work as well. In fact, I've gone a bit overboard there because some of these things sort of turn up twice because, UCS and that's cost heavy. That's about right. Yeah, that gives all four of them. That's good. Okay. I could just create a new read-only role for all sites and give her that. She'd be happy. Now, as I said, those user-defined roles can be very useful. In fact, Fatima, when she was creating all this stuff, she assigned herself to multiple roles so that she could test them as she was going in. Okay, she's got all of these things. She's got the account administrator that does everything. But she can also assign herself to all of these other roles so that when she logs in, if you see my login when I log into Intersight, it almost goes past the end of the page because I've been in there, I've experimented with everything, I've created user-defined roles for just about every system privilege there to figure out really what that privilege does. So by assigning myself to every role I create, I can test each role before I assign it to the users. Okay, so just as a quick reset crap. In our design, user-defined roles give each user rights to 2 organizations. Now, that's kind of important in a little while. Okay, so there's Bell up there at Coffs Harbour. There's Josh looking after his storage. There's Ben looking after UCS. Okay, and Tim there at Sans Souci, he's come back from the beach now. He's on the job, right? And in this design, each organization is linked to one resource group, right? So that's pretty much the story. And then we've got the overall one with Fatima's got the admin rights and we've given Lara read-only to. But there are some gotchas, okay? There are some gotchas. And the gotcha is, this arrangement works well if we're not using Intersight managed mode. So pure storage, yeah, works well for that. UCS Manager managed UCS devices, it works well for that. The problem is that when you go to Intersight managed mode, we've now got policies and profiles and pools, and each of these can be linked to only one organization. So once you get to Intersight managed mode, you have to be a little bit more careful about how you do it. And I'll give you a bit of advice. You can take it or you can choose something different. But the thing is that if we look at a couple of our roles, you know, we've got Ben here who's got the admin UCS role. He's got links to two different organisations. He's got the Sans Souci UCS and the Coffs Harbour UCS organisation. Belle up here, she's got the admin role for Coffs Harbour, so hers is site related. So she's got the Coffs Harbour UCS organisation and the pure organisation for Coffs Harbour, right? So the only organisation that they share is this Coffs Harbour UCS policy. So if we're going to share resources, okay, as we heard yesterday, if we went to the Intersight talk, then if we want to be able to share these across all of these, across the whole organisation, or across your whole company, I suppose, we've got to be careful about how we link these things to organisations. So it's possible that maybe Ben creates a bias policy for UCS and he links that to the Sans Souci UCS organisation. Belle can't use it. Okay, even though Belle may have rights to the equipment that policy's been applied to. So that's the little bear trap that you've got to watch out for. So when you think about that, you've got to kind of choose, well, how am I going to do my resource groups and put it all together? How am I going to organize things? And once you get to Intersight Manage Mode, it probably makes more sense, especially if you want to see a resource thing, you know, resources across groups, to try and organize your resource groups and your organizations along types of equipment. You know, so maybe you've got a UCS resource group for everywhere and a pure resource group for everywhere, and that's okay for Josh. He takes care of pure. It's good for Ben. He takes care of the UCS. But now our site administrators are going to have access to both of those, so that they'll be able to share the policies. And now we'll only have one set of policies for pure. Well, actually, it doesn't really apply to pure, but anyway, just, you know, imagine it does. I should have said UCSX or something like that, and another set of policies for UCS Manager or something like that. So that's, you could organise it around sites, but probably makes more sense to do it this way. The key to that is that what you need to do is, I advise everybody to go out there and start creating some of these resource groups, start playing around, putting devices into them, experiment with your user-defined roles and figure out which is going to work for you. But please don't put everybody in the, you know, in the all category and make them all system administrator. Okie doke. And that, my friends, I think I've got a couple of, that's the end of my presentation. I'm 5 minutes early, so I've got questions before I draw the prize. Any questions before I? Okay, so look, that's where we get to the really important part, is hang around, see who wins this lovely Fire TV with 4K and Alexa voice remote. And I'm going to have to pick it. Now, remember, if it's 81, I'm going to have to put it back because that's Lara's. It's not. It's 346372. Is that you? 346372. We have a winner. Congratulations. There you go. You give that. I don't know. I check it. I believe it. Okay. That's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I hope you got something out of it. Yeah.